Morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. I'm Yuval, Safe Fellow, SPCT, as well as a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer, which gives me an interesting perspective about the world of Agile trainers, the certification world, and today what I wanted to talk about is exactly that, focusing on the Safe SPC. So I know this could be a heated topic. If you have any questions or comments, please share those in the comments, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube. And I'll start with my perspective about this. I'm going to start with what is the SPC and then quickly go into what I see as the strengths and weaknesses of the model and how it's currently implemented. And I'll finish with some opportunities or suggestions, mainly for enterprises or leaders that are leveraging SPCs or thinking about how to leverage SPCs to help their scaled agile journey. So let's dive right in. This is actually a topic that is related to the theme of safe criticism. There's a lot of safe criticism out there. Enterprises, leaders that are looking to figure out how to achieve agility at scale are considering different options. They're looking at different perspectives, and some of what they see out there can be confusing, frightening. Some of that, is meant to be frightening, meant to cause people to think twice before they choose a certain direction. Some of it is fair criticism that is worthwhile addressing. As a member of both the professional Scrum community, the Agile community at large, as well as the SAFe community, I'm exposed to a lot of it, and I see my role as helping people both understand the criticism, understand what's real, what's not, as well as work to use SAFe in a way that makes sense, as well as work within the SAFe community as both a fellow and SPCT to actually deal with some of the fair criticism out there, either by explaining better or changing the ecosystem so that we actually reduce the likelihood of some of the anti-patterns that we see out there. And with that in mind, this isn't a new topic. You can see here that I was talking about not being afraid of the big bad wolf, even back in 2017 in a conference up in Maine in Agile Name Day. If you want to see what I had to say there, you can check out the slides. I don't think there's a video recording that is available. But one of the topics that often come up is people are basing their criticism on the fact that they're seeing some bad SAFe implementations out there. They're seeing some anti-patterns. They're seeing some mechanics. They're seeing some of what I call SAFe theater, Agile in name only. And a lot of the criticism that I hear is that, SAFe is actually implemented by people that don't understand enough about agility. And in order to deconstruct that criticism, we need to understand a bit more about who are the people that organizations are typically leveraging to implement SAFe. And that's where the SPC role come in. SPC stands for Safe Practice Consultant. And those are the people that are certified and are positioned from SAFe's perspective to actually lead the SAFe journey for an organization. If you look at the responsibility wheel from SAFe 6.0, we talk about responsibilities such as embodying a lean agile mindset, leading the change, implementing SAFe, and that includes coaching, training, coaching specifically around flow, and accelerating business agility. All of that makes total sense, right? You want to have somebody in your team as you're implementing any sort of scaled agile approach that would be, helping with leading the change, training, coaching flow specifically. There's nothing that doesn't make sense on this list. All of these things make total sense. I guess and I'll also say that identifying that there's a need for this sort of role as part of an enterprise agile journey also makes total sense. In the past, if you look at the framework such as Scrum talks about the Scrum Master as a true leader. And when you dive deeper, you can see that the Scrum Master should really be in a position where they coach the organization, not just teams. And you can see them as some sort of parallel to the SAFe SPC role. But unlike Scrum, SAFe takes the approach of being very explicit that there are different roles at different levels of the organization. There's the Scrum Master team coach at the team level. There's the RTE, or what I like to call the art coach, or the art flow coach at the art level for a team of teams. That's very similar to the Scrum Master, but at a different scale. And you also have SPCs that don't necessarily have a role that is directly attached to a team or a team of teams. They work in between teams, they move between teams, arts, portfolios, and they support the overall journey. They're more at the level of the Lean Agile center of excellence, you might say. So with that in mind, what's wrong with this model? And in order to understand that, in order to start thinking about what's working well and what's not working well in this model, in order to dive into a SWOT analysis, if you'd like, for this model, the place I want to start with is with how you actually become an SPC. So if we look at how you actually become an SPC, you become an SPC formally, and that's the key point here. Formally, all you need in order to become an SPC is to participate in the Implementing SAFe class, join a class that's led by an SPCT, an SPC trainer. That 4-day class is the great deep class, going over both SAFe's principles, practices, mindset, as well as how to actually go about implementing it, the patterns for implementation, what to pay attention to. There's always room for improvement in what is included in that class, but there's also a limit to how much people can learn at the beginning. The issue is not with the class, in my view, at least. The issue is that after participating in the class and after passing the exam, which is not trivial, but is still an exam, and that is a multiple choice exam about your knowledge that you can learn from being in the class, people get certified to be an SPC. So far, so good. And if we look at what are some of the strengths of that model, I'm gonna go here. The strengths that I see here is that people, when I've had leaders of implementations journeys that I was involved with, when I was able to bring people like the VP engineering, like the PMO, like VP product, like some of the agile coaches that are involved in the journey, when those people attend an Implementing SAFe class and they come into the room whether it is with agile experience or not, but they come into the room to really understand the nitty-gritty details, go beyond what can be discussed in a 2-day leading safe class. Those people are equipped through the SPC certification to really be effective leaders for their agile journey. They really understand the principles, the patterns, what works, what doesn't work. They become great partners for driving the journey, and they can serve as SPCs, coaches within the organization. They can become champions. And the fact that we have these sort of people, that I have this VP engineering that participated in the SPC class, and after it said, you know what, I'm going to be the RTE for my organization. It was a small organization, one art. I'm going to be the RTE for that organization, at least in the first couple of PIs. I want to be involved at that level, even if they don't want to take on that role, even if they want to take on another role. Being an SPC really helped them. The other strength that we see is if you take the right people with the right level of experience. So they've trained people before, they've coached people before, or they've done enough with SAFe over time that they can actually do this well. The SPC certification, together with that experience, is a great combination that can actually support the fan-out model, the scaling fan-out model that SAFe talks about, that SAFe relies upon to achieve agility at scale. If I go back to this description over here, what we're basically saying, what SAI is basically saying, is to make the role-based training required across the organization practical and cost-effective. So one assumption here is if we really want to achieve meaningful change throughout the organization, people need to be trained. They need to really understand what SAFe is about. They need to get a deep understanding, including ideally the certification that causes them to stress test their learning and digest it. All of that is good stuff. You might argue that's not necessarily needed, but we've seen results, including by what happened when Scrum was rolled out, that this sort of training really helps organizations improve. That doesn't mean that you should measure the success of your agile journey through how many people have you certified. You shouldn't. But there's plenty of evidence that if you actually support people with the right sort of learning, you really help them achieve or change their behaviors and achieve different outcomes. But when you look at the enterprise scale organization, that's quite a big lift for organizations, especially if you need to start to depend on specialized trainers. And the model that SAI came up with is a train-the-trainer fan-out model, basically saying those SPCs can teach others. On the surface, that's something great, and I've seen plenty of SPCs or plenty of people that combining the right experience about agile, the right experience about SAFe, the right class presence, the right gravitas, can actually take all of that, combine it, and deliver great training. The problem with the model is that the model doesn't enforce all of these prerequisites. The model only says, listen, we're going to certify you. We're not going to test all of the other things. That's not a model that we can apply at scale. We can do that when we have in between 300 and 400 professional Scrum trainers. All of these people do go through, a rigorous process of figuring out that, they're awesome and can actually deliver effective professional training. SAI goes through that process when we talk about the SPCTs. Again, hundreds of people that, where this sort of validation process that's human-based can work. But when we talk about SPCs, that's not the model right now. One could argue there are different ideas for how to actually stress test an SPC, validate these things. And I hope that at some point there's some development on that front. But the assumption is that the market can self-correct. The assumption is that, even though people have the certificate, the market leaders that are hiring these SPCs or enterprises that are sending their internal people to become an SPC have realistic expectations of what these people can actually do just based on the certificate, and are not asking them to do unreasonable things. But the reality we see out there in the trenches, based on what I see in some organizations I visit, based on a lot of it what I see when people come to safe classes, whether it's the SPC class or other classes, is that there are different dynamics. It's very tempting for organizations to rely just upon the certificate. And it's very tempting to some consultants or other practitioners and professionals to actually level up using that certificate and then go and teach a class. So, for example, we hear some comments like, I've been sent to this class by my organization. I don't know anything about Agile or Safe, but I need to train and launch an art next week with no outside help. Good luck, right? And when you see these sort of people as an SPCT teaching the class, you're wondering around, are we even, is it even professional to give people this certificate and let them teach? Are we doing the right thing here? We see some consultants that are taking this class and add another 3-letter acronym to the resume to make more money. That's fair on their behalf. The problem is that, on the other side, are people giving too much credence to just the certificate? It seems like it based on some of the results that we're seeing out there. The other piece is that the model of, SPCs starting to train, it seems like people can take a 4-day class and then start teaching a topic that they have no experience in. Sometimes it's a topic that they didn't even sit in the class for. Now, it's true that SAFE, especially these days, actually verifies with people, do you know, it asks people to validate, do you know this topic that you're enabling yourselves to teach? But how often do people say no when the answer is no? Is it enough to ask this? But there is a valid question here about, is it SAFE's role to validate, or is it, is it an open market where the market should actually self-regulate around this? It's an interesting question. I want to talk a bit about what are some of the results of what's going on there. So some of the results are that people sit in on mediocre SAFE training when it's delivered by people without the right experience, with the right intentions, but without the right experience. Some of that leads to SAFE theater, to people just going through the motions, people that do things without really understanding them or believing in them. And of course, that would lead to fair, safe criticism, because people from the outside see, stuff that's not working. It's not necessarily what the framework is talking about, but the framework and how the framework is being deployed is part of the ecosystem. The argument that this is different than what we talk about in the framework is an unfair answer to this criticism, in my view, because how we deploy the framework is also a big part of it. And those are, interesting conversations that we, of course, have all the time within the SAFE community. And it's similar in any environment. When you look at Scrum, a lot of the Scrum that you see out there is not something that looks like professional Scrum. And one could argue, well, that's people who are implementing it's fault. And some other people would say, you know what? Maybe the fault is with the Scrum guide, with the ecosystem around deploying Scrum. And it's a complex environment of how do we actually create frameworks that are easy to actually deploy the right way. Now, the threats that are emerging because of this are things like safe implementations that are stalling, people even giving up on safe, the SPC certificate is being devalued, safe training is being devalued, people lose trust in the value that they might get with an SPC. Even if that SPC actually has the experience, we're starting to see environments where having an SPC is not necessarily adding value to your name, and that's worrying. That's a shame, I think. And obviously, that all leads to people that are less interested in learning deeply about SAFe and the SPC certification. There are a lot of people, for example, that I look at in the professional Scrum community. I think those people could become great SPCs, and some of them do become great SPCs. The combination of deep professional Scrum knowledge and learning about SAFe would make them, and does make them, great help for organizations that are trying to achieve agility at scale. But some of these people would not touch SAFe with a stick right now because of some of these dynamics. So it's a complicated, complex challenge. But I want to talk a bit about opportunities. Let's not be all negative here. And by the way, I'm happy to look at comments and answer questions along the way. And I'll have a specific Q&A section once I finish with the opportunities. So, not all gloomy here. Let's actually look at some opportunities that we have. So, one thing that one hope I have, and something that I really have some evidence on, because that's what's happening in organizations that I'm involved with, is enterprises that develop a more realistic expectation of what the SPC is about and what to expect, especially from newly minted SPCs. When I work with an organization, I highly recommend that that people that are deeply involved with the journey join the implementing SAFe class, become SPCs, look at the toolkits, participate and pair up and support, SAFe training, but to build a roadmap of where and when does it make sense for them to actually be solo SPCs, if you want to call it that, especially when it comes to training, but not just. I would say the training is maybe easier than facilitating a value stream identification workshop. So whether it's an internal situation or whether it's people that take the implementing SAFe class and come out of that class and say, you know what, I'm really glad I learned all of this. I understand how big this is, how much knowledge is needed, what's the experience that is needed. I understand that it does, that there are things I should be doing as my getting started as an SPC steps, and there are things that I should probably work on building some capability, some competence around before I go and do. I hope that the people that are taking the implementing SAFe class start to develop this understanding that this is a journey. I hope that enterprises and the leaders driving change build some understanding of what to look for when it comes to proficient, experienced SPCs that can really support our journey and go beyond just the acronym, the SPC certification. There could be several ideas for how to do that. One tip would be to take a look at the article. If you're hiring an SPC, a quick tip: um, go look at the SPC article on Scaled Agile Framework with the responsibility wheel and all of the responsibilities, and there are specific questions in this article. Ask people, to share stories about their experience doing these things, some of the outcomes, some of the challenges that they faced doing any of these things. Well, tell me about a situation where you coached flow and had conversations about limiting whip with somebody. Tell me a situation where you trained people on safe, whether it was formal training or not. Tell me about those situations, not just did you take the SPC and did you pass. Another thing that I do when I need some help implementing safe or coaching an organization is I look for other indications. And for me, I'll tell you the first person I go to is somebody that has both an SPC as well as something that is like a professional Scrum trainer that, as I mentioned, is going through some more validation in the journey, and it also brings the value of another perspective. I don't, I appreciate people that actually have a diversity of perspectives and doesn't just look at safe. Even a PSM3 is an interesting combination because it's an open exam that shows a lot of experience. Those are just examples. There could be other things, and it's not just about certifications. But if you're a certificate, looking person, maybe look at other things, other certifications as well. Another opportunity to do something about this is for SPCs as well as Lean Agile Centers of Excellence and enterprises looking at this, SPC communities of practice, to look at this responsibility wheel as some sort of competency or improvement self-assessment and identify potential areas for them to focus on. There's an interesting comparable tool that Scrum.org created recently that Stephanie Ockerman paired up with Comparative Agility and Scrum.org, which is the Scrum Master Improvement self-assessment. Something similar could be very useful for SPCs. And some of my colleagues in the SAFE community are also helping SPCs that want to grow with the SPCs Unleashed series. There's a lot of content that we could provide, a lot of additional learning that SAFE already provides for SPCs, but it starts with people wanting to actually go through this journey. The whole problem that I'm talking about is not that SPCs don't want to, not the SPCs that are at a certain place in their journey and understand where their place is and want to improve. Those people are great and they're great partners for change. My challenge is with people that are just abusing this model and with organizations that are putting people into untenable situations where they are asked to do some things that are unrealistic because of some economic incentives or other incentives for as part of how people are structuring the implementation. And that's something we should discourage. We should find ways to discourage organizations from, making these expectations from fresh SPCs. And I see my role as an SPCT and as a SAFE fellow is to actually talk about this. And that's why I'm doing this live stream. Talk to enterprises, continue to educate people about how to look at the SPC role, what should the SPC journey look like, how to structure a safe journey, what's the role of partners and external SPCs and SPCTs and fellows, what's the role of internal SPCs, how it's a partnership between them, how over time you should build the internal dependable team of SPCs that can take on everything and not necessarily need an external SPC or SPCT forever. But on the other end, it doesn't mean that you can start like that from day one. Another idea that that has been circulating a bit is to come up with some sort of professional SPC credo, manifesto, whatever, where we talk about the fact that SPCs, as let's say, as part of being part of this community, agree to what does professionalism look like. When are we ready to actually go train people? When are we ready to actually go and do something, and to agree not to do something that is unprofessional, on the border of unethical, as SPCs? And some of that, would obviously make more sense when it comes as part of the framework. And I know that there's great work that's being done to help clarify some of these things by SAI. So stay tuned for that. But I think part of it is also our role as the community of professionals in this space, whether it's SPCTs that a lot of SPCs listen to, whether it's in the SPC class or later on, whether it's safe fellows, and whether it's safe SPCs. We should also be listening to feedback and criticism about the SPC role, and engage in these sort of conversations. What I tell people is I'm always happy to discuss any sort of safe criticism, as long as it's a constructive, respectful conversation. So feel free to pull me into any such conversation. All right, so let's see what questions or comments or insights do we have on any of this. Not seeing any comments right now, but I'm gonna wait for a couple of comments, and I'm also gonna try and open LinkedIn on the side window and see if anything is going on there that I'm not seeing. Over here. All right. Looks like everybody is either shocked or in full agreement. I don't see any additional questions here. I'll stay here for a couple of more minutes in case somebody has others. So Robert, I want to see SPCs that are overmatched ruin it for the rest of us. Yeah. All right, Mike, what advice do you have for SPCs without more seasoned practitioners in their organizations to help them? What are the best resources to get mentoring, coaching, additional education? So I would start probably with Safe Studio, with the SPC forum on Safe Studio. Go into that forum, ask questions. There are plenty of SPCs, Ts that are willing to help. If you ask that question on LinkedIn, on the Scaled Agile framework or the SPC group, I'm sure other people can help as well. But realistically, if we look systemically, I think part of the situation is if you are driving towards agility at scale in your organization, and you're asked by your leaders to do that without any sort of support, that's an issue, right? I'm not saying you should have a safe gold partner or a big consulting firm drop on your organization with hundreds of SPCs and SPCTs and take over everything. That's probably not the right idea for every organization. In some situations, it makes sense. But I think making the ask of, can we tap into the knowledge of, an SPCT, an experienced SPC, a safe fellow, it's probably a fair ask in an organization that is investing a lot of energy, if not money, in trying to achieve agility at scale. I for one, have worked with organizations where I was involved in a light touch environment, especially later on in their journey, but sometimes even initially, where they just know that they can reach out to me and spend time, with any sort of question that comes up, whether it's email or Zoom or whatever, even though people in this organization are in the front lines and driving everything themselves. I hope that makes sense. Any additional questions or thoughts on this Friday nice afternoon in Boston? By the way, Mike, ChatGPT is becoming more and more interesting resource for answers to questions, but of course your mileage may vary at this point. But I started to ask ChatGPT what it thinks, or I'm currently experimenting with Bard to see what it has to say and how that would compare to what I would answer. And it's more useful than some of the answers that you get from some SPCs, I would say, but probably less useful than what you get, much less useful than what you get from others. So there's still work in that space. Any additional questions, thoughts? About SPCs or safe criticism in general while we're here? If not, I'll close the live stream and I'll plan to see you one of the next live streams. So to sum up, today we talked about the safe SPC role and some of the strengths and promises of that role in supporting the agility journey for organizations. We talked about some of the weaknesses that are a result of this model, especially the limited validation of what's the experience that is needed to get the SPC certification, in parallel with the fact that organizations are treating the certificate itself with too much value and are not looking at the whole picture of what the SPC brings. We talked about some of the impact of that issue and some ideas for how to actually address this that we could all do something about, whether it's us as SPCs, us as SPCTs or fellows, or us as people thinking about how to actually weave together, internal, newly minted SPCs with people with the right experience, whether they're coming from inside the organization or from outside. Hope this was useful. happy to continue the conversation in the comments or link on LinkedIn or YouTube. And if you are looking for help to figure out how to actually build an SPC model that works for your organization, feel free to ping me as well. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.